Welcome back to Promoted. I'm your host, Felicity Fury, co-founder and CEO of We Aspire. And I am joined by the fabulous Renee Wooten, speaker, pilot, engineer, aerospace engineer, might I add, and just all-around fabulous person. Renee, thank you for joining me again today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am calling from Burragum Lands today. Felicity, whereabouts are you calling from?
I'm on Gubby Gubby country as per usual. Loving it here. Wanya, welcome to everybody listening. And we've got another juicy episode today, Renee. I'm very intrigued how this conversation is going to go. We are talking about how to talk about people when they're not in the room. So it can be challenging if you are a leader, if you have team members who are performing or not performing, and how do you have that conversation about them? I know for me, my personal rule is no gossip, and it's something that I have with my husband. I've always had in our businesses and organizations is, saying things to people's face rather than gossiping behind their back. And I think it's a blanket rule that's great for life, but it can be tricky when there are some of these professional challenges that come up where you might need to intervene with someone's performance. So Renee, first of all, what's your take on this topic? I'd love to hear your perspective.
I love this topic so much. And I love it because it's such a challenging topic. It's such a challenge to, to take the higher road when you're frustrated. It's so easy to talk negatively about people, I think, is the key piece that I want to reflect on. Innately, not everyone will get along, whether it's in a workplace scenario, your personal life, within your family even. You're not going to love everybody that you interact with. And sometimes you're in projects and on pieces of work that you have to work with people that you just naturally clash. There isn't that, synergy. There are deep values conflicts, and it's very easy to walk away from interactions and just be like, that person is awful. I don't want to spend 5 more minutes with them in the room. However, I do want to just reiterate or highlight that this is one of the true leadership essential skills for me. To have poor interactions and walk out of that room and only share positive information will truly ignite you as a leader. People will notice it because more than likely the people around you are feeling exactly the same way. And people want to talk about it. People want to gossip. People want to share how they truly feel. But if you can walk into and out of a room and have experiences like that and go, yep, you know what? Whilst that person might not be so easy to get along with, they bring with them incredible skills and experience. And, this is going to be a phenomenal project, irrespective of those value clashes, because we're just going to have to find ways to really work with that person and work in the most positive way. And to me, that is just like, now I want to lead like that too. I want to have conversations like that. I want to walk out of every room and be that kind of shining light around how to emulate only positive sentiment and never speak awfully about people, even when there is opportunity to. What about you, Felicity?
Oh, I've noticed definitely by taking this on, and it's been a number of years since I've had this no gossip thing. It actually came from a leadership training program that I did that was part of one of their ground rules. And practicing has been so fascinating because I've even picked it up on people in the workplace where I've said, look, I've had this personal, I feel a bit silly saying I've got this personal thing about gossip, or, hey, look, I've got this basically this rule. And it's been so fascinating implementing that, because then I've had colleagues when I've gone to say, and it's like a habit, I think, a habit that you break. And so when you're starting out the habit, you're going to make mistakes. And there's been times where I've gone, oh, actually, I think that might be gossip. Or my colleague has said, oh, I think that might be bordering on gossip territory. And then it's so great when other people are in on the rule, then they're picking you up on it if you've got that kind of environment. And it can be, I think there's like a natural, human being thing of wanting to gossip and do that, talk. It's like, the tabloids or the celebrity newspapers. It's part of our culture. But I think it's a personal value for me not to do that. And then the question is, well, how do you get around that? What can you do? Okay, you're not allowed to gossip. How do you have these kinds of conversations? And one of our amazing mentors, Frank, he talked about talk about the behavior and not the person. And I think this is also a great parenting tip as well, which I think is a cool one to employ, or even with your partner is, I don't dislike you as a person. I dislike your behavior. And if you actually look into things like growth mindset, it's very much aligned with that of separating. It's not saying like you are a, bad person, or you are not good at that. It's like in that specific instance, you behaved in that way. And it kind of, I feel like it's a bit of a almost like not shortcut of the brain, but it can kind of decouple those things. So it makes for much more of a productive conversation, because it's like saying, I'm bad at maths, or I'm just not a maths person. Well, actually, you might not, maybe you don't enjoy it, but with practice over time, you can get good at it, which is definitely aligned to the growth mindset approach, rather than having a fixed mindset and fix like, I'm always this way. I'm always going to be bad at maths, for example.
Yep, I love that. And can you give us some examples of a sentence where you would focus on behaviors and not the person?
Putting me on the spot, Renee. Well, I usually like using the phrase something like, I've noticed that. Like, I've noticed that maybe there's a couple of times that you've been late to a meeting. Firstly, I want to check, are you okay? Is there anything I can support you with? Okay, great. Then let's have a conversation, about why. Or yeah, I've noticed that you used to be really on top. You have been in the past, you've been really on top of delivering and picking up on small details. And I've just noticed the last couple of times that you've submitted some work, there are a few mistakes in there. So let's have a conversation about that. Yeah. Are you okay? What's coming up for you? Listeners, tell me if this is terrible. If you would hate that approach, please write in and tell us. But that would be how I would approach it. Have you got any tips, Renee? I can learn from
Yeah,
you.
I think that's a perfect example. Yeah, you focus on the actual issue rather than the person. I think that that's the sentiment. But I really did just want to give people an active way to actually implement that. So thank you for sharing. And I think, uh, when I think about how to have conversations about people when they're not in the room, I like to be aware of the fact that information travels and people aren't silly. So you shouldn't treat them silly. But equally, I think that if you can consistently be a positive sentiment and have positive sentiment about people, it builds this trust that you are a good leader and that you won't speak poorly about the other people in the room um, when they're not in the room. So to me, it has so many, ripple effects if you can lead in that space and lead really well. So for me, the pragmatic kind of side of it is don't speak poorly about people in the workplace, full stop. And if you do, it has to be with a trusted person, and it has to be because you have to have that conversation, not because you'd like to have that conversation. So if it's affecting the team dynamic, if there needs to be some action taken and you need more people to be able to deliver that action, only then would I actually have conversations. And then it would be factual. It wouldn't be, speaking about people poorly and having a gossip, as we like to
Yeah.
call it. It would just be, hey, I'm experiencing this. This is the impact it's having on my team. Um, and I'd like to take this action, but I need your support to take that action.
Yeah.
And only that's how I would kind of go about it in the workplace. And to be honest, I think when it comes to like family dynamics, my family are so good at speaking about each other. It's not funny. And it's something that I really I don't like being a part of because it goes against my personal values because I'm so mindful of the positive effect it's had on me when so I had a boss at my previous employer. Shout out to Alex Sortzis if you're listening to this. This woman has had the most profound impact on my career, my mindset. And she is the most humble human being, but incredibly capable. And Alex always backed me. So she, once she employed me into my role, I had huge imposter syndrome at the time. It was my first strategic role. I didn't know anything about like the frameworks that strategy, adopts. I didn't know how to tell a story with a PowerPoint. And so I was coming in and just felt completely overwhelmed. And not only did she consistently back me, but then when I wasn't in the room, she told the same story to my face that she told to other people that worked with me. And that was demonstrated in multiple examples over the year that I worked with her. And So I built so much trust in what she was saying to my face was the message everybody else was listening to, that I was like, that's the sort of leader I want to be. So even if things are tough and where I had skepticism about some people, or I would go to her about some of the issues I was having, she would always, always, for every single individual, turn around and say, you know what? Yep, that's challenging. Let's take some steps on how you can manage a conversation around that. She would never say something negative about the person though. And, where there were whispers of, someone wasn't doing their job well or whatever. And if I asked her about it again, she would just say, I don't agree with that. Actually, this has been my experience. But if you're hearing that, make sure you're speaking positively about those people. And as long as your interactions are good with them, I wouldn't go any further type thing. So I just took so much from her leadership style that I was like, right. So now I try and employ it in so many ways in the way that I like to work now. Um, but it is hard, right? Because culture changes into different groups and people like and have different habits around things as well. So, when I come back to my family, I guess that's something that I really like to put in place now is shutting down those conversations and very quickly. Um, and if I'm buying into it, it's like that old habit of, oh no, I'm still doing it. Or I said the thing that I didn't want to say and now I feel like icky about it. So then I try and recover the situation. So, it's such a challenging thing to do. Every culture with different pockets of people is different. But for me, I really stand by the fact that no matter what your experience is, be factual, focus on behaviors and not the person, and be kind. Everybody's going through stuff, right? We don't know if someone is having a really bad experience in your circle, what the influences are, how much they're dealing with on their own. So reach out first and ask as well if you've got somebody in your close circle that, isn't behaving like they normally would or, isn't their best self.
Totally. As a parent who is often sleep deprived, I have a lot more compassion for people and I go, wow, well, maybe they didn't sleep last night and that could just be what's going on. And you touch on so many great points there, Renee. And yeah, I completely agree. I think for me, I aim to speak with the person first before speaking with others. And if I do want to talk to a mentor or someone else about a situation I'm dealing with a tricky person, I'll remove names, organizations, and so that it's a really, they don't know anything, I'm not I guess, speaking poorly of someone to another person. I think that's so important. And what I love about the story you share with your previous boss was that she is creating he or she, you said Alex, I'm not sure if it was you said she, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually,
She was cultivating that environment and she was demonstrating leadership for people. And so she was setting that tone of here's how I behave and how those expectations around how she expects others to behave. And I think it's great when you're in teams, you can start to cultivate that. And then it can be so tricky with family because you're kind of pulled back because you've always kind of been that same person, which I think is really fascinating because if you're in a more junior role and you're stepping into a leadership role in an organization, sometimes people in your organization have viewed you as you previously were in that team. So there might be some team dynamics going on there. And then you're stepping into a leadership role and then you've got to kind of change it up. And you might go, ooh, how I was behaving as a team member is different to how I want to behave now. So it takes, I think, a lot for someone to retrain that environment on who you are now as a leader. And sometimes it's going to be tricky conversations. Like I've had to say things like, hey, look, I used to behave in this way. Now in this leadership role, I've had to think about that and I'm going to behave in this way. And then being consistent with that, which it sounds like your previous manager was really consistent in reinforcing that. And yeah, it's tricky. I think you reminded me of my own mum, and my family does know the story, is that she told me my sister was pregnant before my sister told me. I said, Mum, now I'm going to have to pretend to be really surprised when my sister tells me that she's pregnant. So, Mum, I have already told you, you are a total gossip. And you know that I don't tell you everything anyway. You do gossip if you're listening. And I think I've come to an agreement on that. But Mum has fully acknowledged her goss and it's kind of helpful some ways. I do use it to my advantage. If I don't want to have to tell the whole family something's happening, I just tell my mum within a few days. It has disseminated through the internet.
That's so funny. Oh dear. just reflecting on how you speak about people when they're not in the room as well. I think it's important to be able to share your true feelings. And sometimes you need a debrief and sometimes you do need a goss sesh. But I just want to say, we're not saying don't have those conversations. We're just saying have those conversations when you're in the all clear, when you're not around people that are looking to you for leadership, or
Mm.
even if you're not in a leadership role, just remember that you could be with an employer for a really long time. You could be on a project for a really long time, and people will notice things, and people will, even if you did something a year or two ago, they will remember that when you inevitably do
Yes.
step up into roles. So all I guess I want to land on for this message is be the person you would like to see in that role. Be positive. Um, you know, do your best to be transparent, but be professional when you be transparent. So some examples might be some that we've referred to earlier, which is I can see what you see in that person. However, they also bring XYZ to the table and we have to work with them. So we're going to be positive about this and we're going to make this work. So what are ways that we can work together on this? Or maybe you don't even acknowledge what you've seen, but you say, I can understand what you're going through. Hey, let's take this approach instead. And just don't buy into that gossip. Don't buy into those sorts of conversations that lead down ugly paths, because inevitably you're also demonstrating skills that you're demonstrating values that the person you're sharing that with that today might be your confidant, but in a year's time, that dynamic could have changed. They could be your boss, you could be theirs, and you need to have trust. What do
Oh,
you think?
absolutely. That's so good. I think what a key message I would have from this conversation is, if someone is saying something, gossiping about you behind your back, it says more about them than it does about you. So be that person that you want to be. And I also, final thought is, think about the flip side of it too, saying negative things about people, but how do you also say positive things about people behind their back? Because that also demonstrate your values and who you are. So why not use this as an opportunity to demonstrate who you are as a leader? If someone is, gossiping to you saying, oh, that's so interesting. I haven't thought about in that perspective. And use it as a positive reframe, or actually, sharing that kindness, because again, there's all those little micro opportunities to demonstrate leadership. Anything you wanted to add to that, Renee? I feel like you were on board with that one.
Absolutely. Like we've focused on it from, the perspective of people talking about people poorly, but actually that's such an important piece as well. As if you're advocating for people behind their back, they'll find out, but two, that will build so much trust and confidence in who you are as a person, the brand that you're bringing, the energy you're giving to the team, but also the fact that you're building people up. Like they're the sorts of leaders that get promoted. So how do you walk into a room and link people up and connect them and speak positively about your team, so that, inevitably when and if they get put onto a project and they've heard positive sentiment, that might lead to somebody else's promotion. It might lead to somebody else's benefit and opportunity, which is phenomenal. And like, this is the community we're trying to create here, is sharing like skills, sharing information, insights to help everybody get better at being promoted. So feel free to take some of those tips and tricks today. Share the love within your community, share the positive sentiment, be a leader. And if you do have any questions, write into us. We want to hear from you and continue to help you in your journey through promotion.
So good, Renee. Thank you for another awesome episode. And yes, as Renee said, if you do have questions, comments, feedback, we want to hear all of it. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. I've been getting actually quite a lot of DMs about this podcast. So thank you for all those people who've been getting in touch. Please keep them coming, and we'll see you or hear you in the next episode. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.